Good day, ladies and gentlemen. So, as requested, this is the first podcast, and today I have a very special guest, Jimmy. Jimmy, thank you very much for coming to my podcast today.
Oh, my pleasure, Vickers. Happy to be here.
Cool. Hey, Jimmy, can you? This is a casual podcast, so this is to target the New Zealand Salesforce people who wanted to start Salesforce, or probably who are using Salesforce. So, there's no formalities here as long as you don't swear. But you feel free to grab a beer or some whatever you want. So that being said, Jimmy, could you introduce yourself? What you do and your experience on Salesforce space.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so my name's Jimmy Hesketh. I am a principal technical consultant at Frond currently. I've been working in the Salesforce space for getting close to probably 10 years now. And sort of my background is sort of technical. I've always loved the technical side of the platform. So I'm a dev at heart. I just really enjoy playing with Salesforce, and it's been exciting watching the platform grow and change over the last 9 or 10 years that I've been working with it. So, yeah, that's a really short intro of me.
That's pretty cool. Thank you very much for that. So you mentioned principal technical consultant. So can you tell me what exactly is technical consultant do? Say, for instance, right? I'm from a, say, for instance, if I want to start out into Salesforce, right? I often hear the functional consultant, technical consultant a lot on Salesforce space. So could you tell me what exactly technical consultant means? What do they do? I mean, are they programmers, or are they solution architects, or is there any?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Vickers, and the answer probably changes depending on where you work. But yeah, I think in general, a technical consultant is someone that knows how to code generally. And they can advise on technical solutions. And I guess the consultant part of the title kind of implies maybe a more business-facing role. So a little bit more of a quasi-technical sort of business-facing person that can write code and build stuff. But in saying that, I've worked as a technical consultant in lots of companies, and I've had to do lots of different things. So I think that the job title probably can change a lot depending on where you go.
Okay, all right. So let's say if someone fresh out of the uni, right? If is someone looking for a job in Salesforce, you think a person can start fresh as a technical consultant, probably a graduate technical consultant? Is that something a person who wanted to get into a consulting space, right, on Salesforce, technical consulting? So is it possible for a person to get into technical consulting, or you think that they have to get enough exposure as becoming a developer first, and then from a developer, that's the next stage?
Yeah, I think generally the path would be from that development background. That's like definitely what my path was. So I think generally, yeah, you go and do your development. You do that for a few years and get the sort of technical experience as a developer, and then you can step into a role where maybe you have a bit more client interaction, maybe a bit more sort of business focus, and then you probably step more into that technical consultant role. But I think that also these days there's probably not a lot of differentiation at some places between a technical consultant, and a developer. I think there's a lot of consulting companies that call their consultants technical consultants, and they use them to do development work. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's something pretty much I did in my previous job as well, where I worked as a technical consultant, but I end up doing most of the time development and do partial consulting as well. Yeah, cool. Thank you for that. So you've been working with Salesforce for 10 years. That's quite exciting time, right? 10 years. So when you first started at the Salesforce, did you really like the Salesforce? Because the reason why I'm asking, like, when I came from a .NET background, right? When I first started looking at the Salesforce development space, I felt it's a bit clunky, to be honest, because you can't debug the code, right?
Yes.
Like you used to do in the .NET C# right? So you can run locally. So is that something you think can put off many people, or Like for instance, let's say today a Java developer is listening to us today, right? And they were thinking to get into Salesforce development space. Now, they might think, I can't debug a code like I used to do in an Eclipse, right? So but that being said, there is an integrated debugger, right? So do you think that can be that can put them off, or in spite of that drawback, is it worth getting into Salesforce?
Yeah, like I had quite a similar background to you, Vickers. I started off as a C# developer, and then I was lucky here in little old Nelson to get a job sort of doing C# plus a little bit of Salesforce on the side. So I remember having quite a similar first impression of Salesforce as you, where I remember logging into it for the first time and trying to debug some code that I'd written, and having to go through the Apex debug log and thinking, holy crap, I've gone back in time 15 years or something. But obviously back then I didn't appreciate the pros of it, right? And so I guess, there is some cons of being multi-tenant in the cloud, and one of those is, it hasn't had a real-time debugger for a while. I know that there's now, you can pay to get real-time debugging, and you can do the log replays, which is really cool. So kind of fixed that part of the platform recently. But I think on the flip side, I was impressed at how quickly I was able to get effectively a CRM sort of database up and running, and able to quickly do things that perhaps would take a bit longer if you'd written code for them. So I think back then it was all like workflow rules and stuff. And I remember the first workflow rule I ever created, I was like, holy crap, I just done a field update and sent an email, and I didn't write a line of code. That was pretty cool. So yeah, I think there's definitely pros and cons of it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the interesting thing, what I feel good about Salesforce, right? You can run your entire business using a Chromebook, right? You don't have to install really Visual Studio Code. You can really code it using a developer console, right? If you are someone who is not comfortable with Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a game changer. And to think that was all kind of, they were doing cloud computing 20 years ago. Like they were the forefront, of modern cloud computing sort of organizations. So it's very cool. And to see the platform grow over the last 19 years has been pretty amazing. The frequency of change and the new features that we're constantly, getting brought to us is very exciting. It's an exciting platform to work on. And I think that's probably why I've stayed in the Salesforce space for so long.
That's pretty good. That's pretty cool. So let's say someone wants to start out sales for the first time, right? So do you recommend any specific pathways or any platform? I know the Trailhead is a great place, but do you think any other pathway, or do you think it's good for them to take a Udemy course, or how did you go about starting? Say, for instance, if Jimmy wants to learn Salesforce today, right? So this 2021. June 2021. So if Jimmy wants to start out learning Salesforce for the first time, so what's the first step you think you're going to take? I mean, it's something because the people might be interested to know.
Yeah, well, I mean, other than going through Trailhead and all that kind of stuff, I think the big one that I'd encourage people to do is to just volunteer. So I mean, there's lots of organizations that have Salesforce, and a lot of them will jump at the opportunity to have someone come in for free, whether it's 5 hours a week or 20 hours a week, just to basically use their platform and help them get stuff set up. And I think that if you're working through Trailhead at the same time as doing that, you're kind of nailing the theory side, and you're getting lots of hands-on exposure and actually seeing a real company using Salesforce. Don't get me wrong, Trailhead's amazing and it's great, but I think that a lot of the projects and the modules in there can be quite simplistic, and maybe don't really reflect how business would really use the platform in some ways. So I think getting that real exposure to a real company or not-for-profit using Salesforce is a really powerful way to learn. And that's kind of how I got started as well. I was sort of ended up volunteering probably 20 or 30 hours a week, sort of working in a small IT shop, and that's kind of what got me my first job in the Salesforce space. So yeah, No, that would be one approach I'd recommend.
That's pretty cool. And another thing is that there is a lot of talk about the certifications. I think that's one of the good way to learn that as well, right? It will
Mm.
encourage people to, to have a specific goal, like for instance, going for an admin cert, right? So it doesn't matter if you're a developer or going to be a future architect, right? Do you think that it's worth people to pursue the admin path first?
Yeah, I think starting with admin is such a good base. Like, I didn't get into the certifications, or I didn't start sitting a lot of certifications until probably like 4 years ago. Before that, I just had my Salesforce Force.com developer, and I sort of had that for about 4 or 5 years. And I didn't. To be honest, I was probably just I'm a developer, and I'm just quite happy doing what I was doing, and didn't take the opportunity to go and keep upcerting. But I think that every single certification I've done on the Salesforce platform, I've definitely learned at least a few things, and so I think that's pretty valuable. And especially when you're new to the platform, admin is just gives you such a broad base of skills. You really cover all those fundamental things that to be a good developer on the platform, you kind of need to know. Um, and so, I'd highly recommend everyone starting out, no matter what path you're going to go down on the Salesforce platform. I think that admin is your base. Start there.
That's pretty cool, Jimmy. So, ladies and gentlemen, if Jimmy is saying you should take it, you should, because I work with Jimmy, and I can tell you he's one of the best principal technical consultant I work with. So, if he's saying that you should need an admin certification to work as a developer, then I'm pretty much will go for it. That's cool. Thank you. Excellent. So, do you have any specific feature? Do you like any specific aspect of Salesforce? So, do you say, for instance, let's talk about security, right?
Yeah,
So, how important do you think security is in Salesforce space?
yeah. I think that a lot of people in Salesforce maybe don't have a lot of exposure to security best practices, but I think it's critically important. And I learned a lot about it when I was working at National Australia Bank. I think that it's critical to the platform. I mean, it's critical to people trusting the platform, and Salesforce continuing to win new business. And I think that you can kind of see that by the fact that they've had such a strong focus on it over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of changes to how the default security works on things like communities and sites, and with new features as well, like permission sets and permission set groups and stuff. You can tell that Salesforce is really taking it seriously, as they should. I think we all should probably be a bit more security conscious. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's great. One of the things, like, I would also like to touch that, the profiles and permission sets, right? I mean, who are using that aspect needs to use it wisely, right? Because I have seen that people go and using, oh, let's create a profile for that, profile for this, instead of really looking at the permission sets. Now we got permission set groups, like you said, right?
Mm.
So that's one of the aspects. I think if someone starting out, right, should pay a little bit more attention to that, will really help, companies who are using Salesforce, to leverage the security aspect in an efficient way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think that it makes developing and debugging on the platform so much easier as well. If you have a good, solid understanding of like the role hierarchy, how sharing and visibility works, and then also how your profiles and your permission sets and your permission set groups all tie into that. I think that as you work on the platform, it's going to massively help you in terms of debugging things or figuring out those little issues where somebody goes, "Oh, I can't see this record," or "How come I'm able to see all of this stuff?" It just, it really will enhance your skills and make it, make things a lot easier down the line. I think if you can nail that early, yeah.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, I appreciate that response. It's quite true what you said, Jimmy. because I mean, like I said, I've seen people going creating profiles for different stuff, and then things changes. They're like, oopsie, what? That's not working, right? So that's one of the things I would highly encourage people to pay a little bit more attention. That's great. Now, coming to New Zealand market, right? Since we both are living in New Zealand, right? So it's obviously talk about New Zealand market. It's a great country, so great people and great beers, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So I did hear last time that vaccine register has been maintained in Salesforce, which is fantastic in my opinion. I think Ministry of Health uses Salesforce to maintain that.
Yeah.
So that shows, right, the level of maturity the Salesforce has reached, and if the government agencies trust that Salesforce for their the core, because vaccine is a big thing, right, for even the COVID stage we are. So New Zealand trusting the data, government trusting Salesforce with the data. So that really tells you that Salesforce is up for something, right, and people should really look into that if that's something they're are after. Is that something safe to say, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that I think New Zealand, in terms of Salesforce in New Zealand, I know that when I moved to Melbourne probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I was quite fresh in the Salesforce market, and I moved over to Melbourne and worked over there, and only came back last year just before COVID-19 hit. But I will say that the Salesforce market in Australia seems a lot more like mature. Like there's got a lot more penetration into government clients over there. It's a lot more widely accepted. And I think that we're kind of just starting to hit that point now in New Zealand where we're starting to see some really big government organizations sort of starting to release stuff on the Salesforce platform and starting to buy into the Salesforce product suite. But yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to be a Salesforce person in New Zealand because it's kind of I think it's just getting started. I think we're just going to see it grow and grow, especially now with, like you say, there's so many products that are coming out, like the new vaccine cloud, which I think New Zealand's using. Products like that are just going to keep expanding its reach into corporate New Zealand, I think.
Yeah, and I believe that one thing I really hope that more and more breweries in New Zealand start adopting Salesforce. Cool, right? Imagine going to work and say, "Oh yeah, you're talking about beers all day and fixing a problem in Salesforce space." That's like a dream job.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah,
a App Exchange product for the breweries, because
yeah, that should be something we should do, eh? So how big is Salesforce in South Island? I know that in North Island, right? I mean, since you're from South Island, Nelson, right? Like I live in a small town in Palmerston North, Central North, so we do have a very tiny, minuscule, council uses Salesforce. So is it bigger in Nelson, Salesforce, or is it catching up, or people are aware of Salesforce in something?
Yeah, and I probably can't really speak that well for the South Island, but I mean, in terms of Nelson, the place that I started my career at, Fuse IT, big shout out to them. They do Salesforce stuff, but it's not really a lot of work in the Nelson region. I think when I was there, we had worked for a few smaller clients, like some local businesses and stuff, but much smaller scale than you probably get up on the North Island. A lot of their work was overseas based for the US and the UK. So, yeah, I guess given that I don't really do a lot of Salesforce work in the South Island, I don't think there's a lot here. I have seen on Seek and stuff, there is stuff happening in Christchurch, but obviously, that's a much bigger city than Nelson, so kind of makes sense there's more going on there. But yeah, I think the Salesforce scene in Christchurch is starting to pick up and grow. Obviously, with Trinio down there, and I think that some of the other larger consultancies are starting to have small practices based in Christchurch. So yeah, I think it's growing across the South Island.
Yeah, it sounds good. That's kind. I mean, it's quite big in North Island, right? Especially on Auckland, Wellington. We got a lot of jobs running Salesforce, basically in the government agencies, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, I think if someone who's listening to this podcast tonight, want to start off Salesforce, I think it's a pretty great place to start. And an amount of salaries, people are always interested in money, right? So I just thought, let me mention that as well. It get paid pretty well compared to other technologies. I mean, at this stage. So if you are someone who's interested, it's a great place to start Salesforce. I mean, I don't think so there is any other better technology at this point in time, which it gives you so much of exposure, right? Coding, business, startup things, integration, and even the greatest stuff. Even in the United States, right? One of my mate, he works for AT&T, right? So they use Salesforce as well. So even the telecom sectors, they use a Salesforce, so which is fantastic.
Yeah. I know there's some big telcos in New Zealand that are using Salesforce here as well. But yeah, I guess just to add to your point, like I think that ultimately wages are driven by supply and demand, and I think the demand for Salesforce people in New Zealand is much higher than the number of people there are here. So yeah, I think wages are just going to keep going up and going up and going up.
Yeah, that's good for us.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today, Jimmy. Thank you so much for coming to my show. Like I said, it's my first podcast. I was nervous, but it felt like two buddies having a chat. The only thing I didn't have my beer today, but it's Monday, so it's fine.
Yes. No, all good, Lucas. Yeah, it was a pleasure to join you. And I'm very happy that I was number one.
Oh yeah, thanks, mate. Appreciate it. And you have a good evening. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. Bye.